Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Commuting and Crime with Charlie. I'm Charlie, obviously, because there's no one else here. So today's story is really disturbing because of where it happens. So there was a top violinist. Her name was Helen Haynes, and she was a violinist at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York City in the 80s. So her husband would drop her off and pick her up when she was performing. So this particular day, he's waiting for her to come, and he's waiting and she never comes out. So he goes to see if he can find her, and he doesn't. So he goes home, maybe thinking, okay, maybe he forgot that she was going to go do something, or she forgot that he was going to pick her up, or, trying to find out what happened. So he goes back to the apartment. She's not there. 3:30 comes in. He's a full-blown panic. He's called all the friends. He's called anybody that he could think of, and she's nowhere to be found. Nobody's seen her. So he winds up calling the police. Now, normally, when someone's only been missing for a few hours, the police try to be like, okay, maybe, they just went somewhere, or, they'll turn up. But because of the high profile of where she worked and who she was, they actually responded right away. So they report to the Metropolitan Opera House, and they get the security involved, and now they're trying to figure out what happened. So while they're looking through stuff, they go to her locker, and they find out that all her street clothes are still there. So basically, she's still wearing the black clothing that they wear, if you want to consider it the uniform outfit that she would wear while she was playing. So now red flags, bells are going off. Now, the police, they have two detectives show up. One is an old school detective. The other one is new hotshot. So they figure out, okay, we need to do something, because obviously she never left. So now they start doing a thorough search of the Metropolitan Opera House. Now, for some of you that don't know, the Metropolitan Opera House is massive. There's all kinds of levels. There's all kinds of corridors. And there's people that have actually worked there for years that said, if you leave me to my own devices in this particular area, I'll be lost forever. You'll never find me. Okay, so they start doing a thorough search, and a police officer in one of the lower levels actually finds a tampon in the trash. So, bells go off because it's such an isolated area and it looks, recent. So he bags it for evidence. And then another police officer winds up finding a flower, which he finds out later is what she wore in her hair, in front of the electrician's office, like 20 feet away. So now he goes to the top of the suspect list. So they're still searching. Hours later, nothing. They haven't found anything. Now, a maintenance worker happens to be on the roof of the Metropolitan Opera House for some scheduled maintenance, and he sees a shoe. So he calls the police officers to let them know, and sure enough, there is a shaft that's like 3 stories of a drop, and they find her there. And sadly, she's passed. She's has no clothes on. She has been bound up, and she's got massive head trauma. So sadly, that's what they find. They quickly ruled out the spouse, because the spouse is always the first one to be a suspect, just because of the close proximity, and they quickly rule him out. Now, one of the things that they find is that the boundings on her, because she had her wrist and her feet were bound, had a certain cross type knot that is very commonly used by stagehands when they tie off curtains and they tie off anything that's pertaining to backstage, because 1, it can easily be tied with one hand and it holds, and 2, it can be easily pulled off if they need to. So instantly all the stagehands go to the top of the list. So now they're questioning everybody at the Opera House. Oh, and one thing, while they were up there, a police officer notices a handprint, like a palm print, which again, for the 80s, this was pretty good police work. So they wind up dusting it and, lifting it. And the fact that it lifted fairly good meant that it was recent. It wasn't something that had been there for a while. So now they have that. So now they're like, all right, we're going to fingerprint and interview all the stagehands. Now remember, 1980s DNA was in its infancy. It wasn't even like anything that was really used in crime solving. So now they decide they're going to interview all the people that were there that night, the performers. And we're talking literally hundreds, if not close to thousands of people that were there, stagehands and performers and all of this. So one of the things that they find out is that Helen wanted to talk to the main dancer of the Berlin Ballet Company because she wanted to see if he wanted to commission a sculpture from her husband, who's a well-known sculptor. So she mentions that. So she gets into so that was what she was going up because they asked her at break time, are you gonna come in? She's like, no, I need to go talk to him. So that's what she does during the break, because they didn't need them. They had a bit of a break before they needed them again. So basically she's mid-performance. Now, while they're interviewing people, there is a dancer in the dressing rooms. And at first, they show her the pictures and she's like, no, I didn't see her. But then something clicked and she says to the detective, can I see that picture again? So they show it to her. And then she remembers that she saw Helen in the elevator. And they struck up a conversation, and she said, the reason I remember her now is because there was just something about her, about, the way she was. And she also mentions that there was another person in the elevator, like standing behind her. And she says, he was really close to her, so I didn't know if they were actually together. So that's when Helen mentions that she's going to look for this head of the head dancer for the Berlin Ballet Company, and she's trying to figure out where to get off because she's not, that's how massive the Met House is. Well, the guy behind her says 3rd floor. So they kind of look at him like, okay, eavesdropping much. So basically, the dancer gets off and that was it. And, Helen stays in the elevator with whoever this person is. So because the guy was standing behind Helen, she didn't have a great recollection of what he looked like. Like she said, yeah, he was maybe, a little bit taller than me, and I think he had a mustache. So now they're trying to figure out how they can get a composite. And this was something that was commonly used back in the day. So they bring her in and they put her under hypnotism. They hypnotize her, and she comes up with, he had a mustache, he had long hair, big eyes. So they come up with a composite. Now, when they bring all the stagehands in, there's one guy that sticks out like a sore thumb. Like, he really looks a lot like the composite. So now they're trying to get him, fingerprinted and all that stuff. And he basically says, I'm not doing that, But at first he pretends he's going to cooperate, but he really doesn't. So they're bringing him in for questioning, and they keep going, but he denies, and that's it. They have to let him go. He literally walked out the door. So as time goes on, they were able to. They found out that the tampon that they had found did in actuality belong to Helen. So again, because I'm driving, I'm not trying to kill myself. I forgot what the catalyst was that resulted in this, but they wind up bringing him in, and they did, again, for interviewing. So they said, yeah, I remember now. They said, we have some follow-up questions, so we just want to, ask you some questions. So it turns out that they bring him in, and they do good cop, bad cop. The young cop is the bad cop. The old cop is, the good cop. So they have him there for like 5 hours. He's not going to crack. But then suddenly he says, I just want to talk to the good cop, quote unquote, the older guy. And, maybe it was because he had that fatherly thing or whatever. So finally, the younger guy leaves. He starts talking to the older detective, and he finally confesses. He said, yeah, I did it. Basically, he had been attracted to her, and he made a pass at her, and she basically, you know, rebuked him and slapped him in the face, and that's when he lost it. So he winds up dragging her to the basement. He attempts to assault her, isn't able to, for whatever reason, and then he basically dragged her up to the roof, and he said, I didn't intend to kill her. I just wanted to, you know, I was going to tie her up and intimidate her. That's why I took her clothes off, and I was going to leave her there. But then he said he kept seeing her moving around and squirming like she was trying to get out, and then he literally went over and just pushed her off the railing, which wound up being this 3-story drop, and that's how she passed. So they wind up arresting him, and, you know, he wind up getting found guilty, and you know, he was put in life in jail with possibility of parole, I think, after 25 years. So he's actually applied for parole 7 times, and it's been denied, because he doesn't, there's no regret, no like, I'm sorry I did it. It was just like, yeah, whatever. So yeah, and the thing is, it's so sad because, you know, in watching the interview that the husband did, you could tell he's still so deeply in love with her, and it was such a sad story of, you know, a life cut short. And all her friends everybody actually spoke very highly of her, that she was just that kind of person. Yeah, so that's basically and the guy that wound up killing her, his last name was Cummins, and he's the one that has applied for parole 7 times and been denied. So you can look that up online if you want more information. And sadly, from what I found out, that wasn't the only murder that happened at the Metropolitan Opera House. So warning, don't go backstage when you're in there. So basically, yeah, that's the story of that. So you can look it up online. There's more information there. And this is Charlie signing off, and Commuting and Crime with Charlie. And hope you guys have a great, safe day.